Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, used the filibuster to stymie initiatives by President Barack Obama. Gabriella Demchuk for the New York Times. In the past 3 days, Republican leaders in the Senate scrambled to corral votes for a tax bill that the Joint Committee on Taxation said would add $1 trillion to the deficit, without holding any meaningful committee hearings. Worse, Republican leaders have been blunt about the motivation to deliver on the promises to wealthy donors, and down the road, to use the leverage of huge deficits to cut and privatize Medicare and Social Security. Congress no longer works the way it's supposed to. But we've said that before. 11 years ago, we published a book called The Broken Branch, which we subtitled How Congress is Failing America and How to Get It Back on Track. Embedded in that subtitle were two assumptions. First, that Congress as an institution, which is to say, both parties, equally, is at fault, and second, that the solution is readily at hand. In 2017, the Republicans' scandalous tax bill is only the latest proof that both assumptions are wrong. Which is not to say that we were totally off base in 2006. We stand by our assessment of the political scene at the time. What is astounding, and still largely unappreciated, is the unexpected and rapid nature of the decline in American national politics, and how one-sided its cause. If in 2006 one could cast aspersions on both parties, over the past decade it has become clear that it is the Republican Party, as an institution, as a movement, as a collection of politicians, that has done unique, extensive and possibly irreparable damage to the American political system. Even today, many people like to imagine that the damage has all been President Trump's doing, that he took the Republican Party hostage. But the problem goes much deeper. We do not come at this issue as political partisans. Though we are registered Democrats, we have supported Republicans, consider ourselves moderates, and have worked with key figures in both parties to improve political processes. Still, we can't help seeing the Republican Party as the root cause of today's political instability. 3 major developments in the party required us to change our view. First, beginning in the 1990s, the Republicans strategically demonized Congress and government more broadly and flouted the norms of lawmaking, fueling a significant decline of trust in government that began well before the financial collapse in 2008, though it has sped up since. House Republicans showed their colors when they first blocked passage of the troubled asset relief plan, despite the urgent pleas of their own President, George W. Bush, and the Speaker of the House, John Boehner. The seeds of a largely phony populist reaction were planted. Second, there was the Obama effect. When Mr. Bush became president, Democrats worked with him to enact sweeping education reform early on and provided the key votes to pass his top priority, tax cuts. With President Barack Obama, it was different. While many argued that the problem was that Mr. Obama failed to schmooze enough with Republicans in Congress, we saw a deliberate Republican strategy to oppose all of his initiatives and frame his attempts to compromise as weak or inauthentic. The Senate under the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell weaponized the filibuster to obstruct legislation, block judges and upend the policy process. The Obama effect had an ominous twist, an undercurrent of racism that was itself embodied in the birther movement led by Donald Trump. House leaders continued to inflame the populist anger of their base to win enormous midterm victories in 2010 and 2014. They repeatedly promised the impossible under divided party government that if they won, Mr. Obama would be forced to his knees, his policies obliterated, and government as we knew it demolished. The subsequent failures to do so spurred even more rage, this time directed at establishment Republican leaders. But most pundits still clung to the belief that pragmatism would win out and Republicans would nominate an establishment insider in 2016. Third, we have seen the impact of significant changes in the news media, which had a far greater importance on the right than on the left. The development of the modern conservative media echo chamber began with the rise of Rush Limbaugh and talk radio in the late 1980s and ramped up with the birth of Fox News. Matt Drudge, his protege Andrew Breitbart, and Breitbart's successor Steve Bannon leveraged the power of the internet to espouse the far-right views. And with the advent of social media, we saw the emergence of a radical alt-right media ecosystem able to create its own facts and build an audience around hostility to the establishment, anti-immigration sentiment and racial resentment. Nothing even close to comparable exists on the left. Mr. Trump's election and behavior during his first 10 months in office represent not a break with the past but an extreme acceleration of a process that was long underway in conservative politics. The Republican Party is now rationalizing and enabling Mr. Trump's autocratic, kleptocratic, dangerous and downright embarrassing behavior in hopes of salvaging key elements of its ideological agenda, cutting taxes for the wealthy as part of possibly the worst tax bill in American history, hobbling the regulatory regime, gutting core government functions and repealing Obamacare without any reasonable plan to replace it. This is a far cry from the aspirations of Republican presidential giants like Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower, as well as legions of former Republican senators and representatives who identified critical roles for government and worked tirelessly to make them succeed. It's an agenda bereft of any serious efforts to remedy the problems that trouble vast segments of the American public, including the disaffected voters who flocked to Mr. Trump. The failure of Republican members of Congress to resist the anti-democratic behavior of President Trump, including holding not a single hearing on his and his team's kleptocracy, is cringeworthy. A few Republican senators have spoken up, but occasional words have not been matched by any meaningful deeds. Only conservative intellectuals have acknowledged the bankruptcy of the Republican Party. We have never suggested that Democrats are angels and Republicans devils. Parties exist to win elections and organize government, and they are shaped by the interests, ideas and donors that constitute their coalitions. Neither party is immune from a pull to the extreme. But the imbalance today is striking and frightening. Our democracy requires vigorous competition between two serious and ideologically distinct parties, both of which operate in the realm of truth, see governing as an essential and ennobling responsibility, and believe that the acceptance of Republican institutions and democratic values define what it is to be an American. The Republican Party must reclaim its purpose. Thomas E. Mann and Norman J. Ornstein are the co-authors, with E.J. Dionne Jr., of One Nation After Trump. A version of this opt appears in print on December 3, 2017, on page State Route 1 of the New York edition with the headline How the Republicans Broke Congress.